Hey everyone, I'm Nick Van Eck, the CEO and one of the co-founders of Agora.
Hey everyone, my name is Robinson. I'm one of the co-founders of Wormhole Foundation. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about Agora, what it is, Wormhole, what it is, and more specifically multi-chain stablecoins and how we are solving liquidity fragmentation across all these different blockchains.
So I don't think this comes as a surprise to anyone, but fiat-backed stablecoins have had a relentless rise over the last 4 years. We're now close to 170 billion in market cap between the USDCs, Tethers, and everyone else in the world. We see this going to 3 trillion over the next 10 years, and ultimately we think that fiat-backed stables will eat the entire euro-dollar market, which is about 15 trillion today, and there's a few reasons for that. One, instant settlement. So just being able to move money 24/7 is not just a 10x upgrade, it is a 100x upgrade over the status quo today, especially if you're moving money cross-border. So you could take days, or in some cases weeks. We actually, during our fundraise, had some folks send money from Asia, and it took one 12 business days, the other one 25 business days for it to hit our bank account. This is unacceptable, especially if you're running a business. Two, low transaction costs, so being able to move $150 million at a time for less than a penny is much better than what you're doing today. And also being able to move risk 24/7. So if you're a trading firm, shifting positions over the weekend, again, much better than the status quo today. Some of the other, I think, more subjective things is expanding financial freedom globally. So today, if you're in Mexico or other economies, you're just not served by the banking system because banks don't want you, right? You're either not valuable enough as a customer or too high risk. With fiat-backed stables and blockchain, you can be your own bank. And so we see a large part of our mission as giving bank access or dollar access to those that are less fortunate and don't have it today. And finally, we think stablecoins are U.S. economic and defense tech. So the federal debt has ballooned to 35 trillion, and stablecoins are now one of the largest buyers of U.S. treasuries, right? So we're a persistent buy button on federal debt. That helps lower interest rates, which is great for all Americans, but also expands the use of the U.S. dollar as the global reserve asset, which is great for the economy and great for American defense. So if we look at the history of stables, Tether was the original digital dollar on chain. They got going in 2014. We're non-U.S. based. That's their focus. Obviously affiliated with Bitfinex, but they were originally used primarily by traders to move money cross-border and also on Bitfinex's exchange itself. Right? If folks here remember, BTC was the original quote token used against many different pairs, and Tether helped supplant that. The second era of stables were these exchange-backed stables that got going in 2018, 2019. So that was USDC, which was backed by Coinbase, BUSD backed by Binance, you obviously have GUSD and others. The characteristics that these had is they were US-based, had much better banking access, were much more transparent in their reserves, and were overall, I think, a stronger product. But we need a new model, and so that's why we're here today. Our view is that global money shouldn't have conflicts of interest. These stables were built in an environment much different from today, right? You didn't have DeFi like you do today in 2018, 2019. You didn't have the explosion of custodians, exchanges, VMs, chains. And so today, if you have USDC on Solana or on Fireblocks or Bybit, half of the revenue generated from that USDC goes to Coinbase, who's competing with all those different products. We believe that businesses globally are the ones that are driving utility and liquidity to these assets, and so should share in the benefits. And so what we do at Agora is we KYB businesses, whether they're exchanges, applications, fintechs, and say, hey, we'll pass through the majority of the revenue to you for services that you provide to us, right? Like listing the asset, marketing it, et cetera. And then ultimately, the majority of this cash flow goes back to all these businesses in a compliant way, and then they can choose to use that cash flow how they want, which is ultimately going to better their user experience. Whether it's better products, better security, doing marketing programs and running incentives, it's totally up to them. And so we want to move beyond the rent-seeking models of the prior years where it's capturing all of the value to just two and really three businesses in Circle, Tether, and Coinbase. And so that's us. That's 3.0. We're the open model. We're non-US based, and our focus is on the global market. That's where stablecoins are most valuable because people don't have dollar access, and they're also suffering from the problems of cross-border payments. Lastly, we're institutional grade. So State Street is the fund administrator and the cash custodian of our assets, and the assets are managed by Van Eck, an established asset manager. So you know your assets are safe, secure, and one of the largest GSIBs in the world, and protected in a trust agreement. So we launched about 2.5 months ago, already at 70 million minted. We did 7 million in on-chain volume on Monday, fluctuating between 7 to 10 million. This is multiples more volume than PyUSD was doing at the same time of their launch. So we're growing much faster. We've done 600 million of aggregate volume, 60,000 transactions, and this is just the beginning of our journey. We sort of said we're in limited availability testnet mode as we are going to start our centralized exchange rollout later this month. And so we want to have a unified experience from day one. One of the challenges of being a legacy issuer is that you started out in an environment that wasn't multi-chain, right? So they got going before this interop era. This led to tremendous fragmentation of their assets, where you had 5 different versions of USDC or T on the same chain. And we can build a much better path for users on day one by complementing canonical issuance with interop solutions like Wormhole. And eventually, we can take over those Wormhole deployments and turn them into canonical contracts of AUSD, so you don't have that liquidity fragmentation problem. This is meeting developers where they are, no matter the VM, right? Whether it's Solana VM, it's Move VM, EVM, we want to serve everyone, and we want to be neutral. Ultimately, we want to be incredibly neutral global money.
Awesome. What I love about Agora and Wormhole coming together here is Agora has effectively taken a lot of the learnings over a number of different years from other stablecoin issuers and applied it to Agora and AUSD to ultimately provide a better market or a better model for the market. And with Wormhole, we've gone through somewhat of a similar situation. We've actually been we've had the ability to launch a lot of different chains over the past, I don't know, number of different years and seen a lot of the issues that come up specifically with liquidity fragmentation. I think liquidity fragmentation is kind of this loaded word, and there are a lot of those in this industry, so we'll unpack that a little bit. But first, for those of you who aren't familiar, what is Wormhole? Wormhole is the leading interoperability platform, but interoperability is also one of those words that's like, okay, but what does that mean? At its core, what Wormhole does is it connects blockchains. So it gives 2 blockchains the ability to effectively talk to each other. Effectively, they're sending a message from Ethereum to Solana. You can think about that. You can think about it like a SWIFT, if you will, sending between 2 different banks that don't talk with each other. That's the core primitive of interoperability, kind of connecting all these different systems, making them work. But where the real power in this platform comes from is the tools built, or that the Wormhole contributors build on top of this kind of core primitive, right? So Solana speaking with Ethereum, speaking with Sui, and all these different blockchains. That's the first step. The other step is building token bridges, building multi-chain token frameworks, all kinds of multi-chain applications. So if we fast forward back maybe like 3 years ago, the #1 multi-chain application that most people in this room, if they've done anything on-chain, are familiar with, is a bridge. Wormhole actually, I would say, isn't a bridge. It powers bridges in multi-chain applications. One of the more popular ones that some folks may be familiar with is called Portal, right? Back in 2020, 2021, in the DeFi summer days, I remember seeing people sending absolutely everything through Portal. It was permissionless. You could send USDC, you could send punks, you could send Bored Apes. So we've come a long way since then, but it was really cool to see kind of this like natural proliferation of all these multi-chain applications and users being able to send assets across all these different chains. I like putting this slide up here because I think a lot of us in the room today would probably agree that we live in a multi-chain world. I think maybe we'd have a little bit of an argument on what that multi-chain world will inevitably look like. We just heard a panel about monolithic versus modular and kind of how all of that interacts. But I think we can all agree that we live in a multi-chain world. This graph just shows the number of blockchains, and it's pretty much just up and to the right, as you can see. And so for Wormhole in particular, when we started, this wasn't a consensus bet, right? It wasn't everyone saying, hey, we're going to be in a multi-chain world, so we need things like interoperability protocols. When we started, we were just connecting Solana and Ethereum. But since then, obviously, the need has grown and grown exponentially. And so we're seeing a lot of asset issuers have issues when it comes to maintaining fungibility across all these different blockchains. And while we needed this to help scale, throughput and all these users were bringing on chain and hope to bring on chain, it doesn't make building any easier. So that's really where Wormhole comes in. I love this screenshot. I put same, but different because I've collected these over the years. And what it shows you is effectively the user experience if you want to send stablecoins. There's actually a pretty viral tweet from Georgios from Paradigm being like, who's fixing this? And we launched all these chains, and Ethereum even launched all these L2s. And the idea was like, how do we scale? And I think we did a good job at scaling. But then we all these other problems cropped up. And this I think is one of the largest ones, which I would just sum up as liquidity fragmentation. And I think Wormhole in particular, we're uniquely able to speak about this because candidly, I'll be honest with all of you, we contributed to some of it. At the time, we were solving a problem. How do we connect chains? And getting all these assets everywhere became this kind of unwieldy Cambrian explosion that we had to figure out, okay, we've seen how it happens. Now how do we do it moving forward? So I like putting this slide because it really drives home the experience for the user. I mean, just think about onboarding someone who is not on chain day to day and they see USDC Sol, USDC BNB, USDC ARB. Okay, what does that mean? What do I need to do to swap into these different tokens? So hopefully this is helpful to drive home the problem. And for those who aren't familiar, the Sol, the BNB, the ARB, the Polygon, that indicates the origin chain, right? So all of these have to go back to the chain in which they came from. So wherever you send that USDC, no matter where it is, it's marked by the origin chain it has. So it's effectively you have to send it back through that path. So we've come a long way since then, which we're about to get into, but I wanted to articulate kind of the pain that users and also developers, right? If you're a developer and you need to build liquidity for your DeFi application, which one of these do you choose? Do you choose the one from ARB? Do you choose the one from Axelar? Do you choose the Tether, et cetera? So I think I'm beating a dead horse here with the problem, but hopefully you guys get that. Now let's go into solutions.
Yeah, and maybe just jumping in quick, like this doesn't have to happen again, right?
Yes.
By working with Wormhole from day one, we can always provide a good user experience because we can have native AUSD or Wormhole AUSD on Solana and say, hey, this is going to be the authentic AUSD, so keep your assets here, right? And then ultimately take over those contracts and turn it into a canonical asset. So this doesn't have to happen again.
Yeah, so effectively what Nick just said, we're solving the liquidity fragmentation problem. And I said this earlier, but I'll say it one more time. The reason why this is so important is because of UX like we just saw. But think about if you're a new blockchain, Sui, it feels like it's been around for a while, but actually, didn't launch too long ago. There's blockchains launching all the time. There's Barachain, there's Monad that we're all probably familiar with. They need as much help bootstrapping liquidity and building those ecosystems as possible. Now imagine you want to go build an app and you have to build liquidity on your DEX. Which stablecoin do you choose? Insert any asset issued, which one do you choose? So these are problems that hurt the ecosystem, the blockchain, hurt the application, and also the user. But today, we've launched is what we call native token transfers. So a lot of the legacy ways in which you would send an asset cross-chain would be what most people think of as like a lock-and mint model, right? So there's a smart contract on the origin chain. You lock it in that smart contract. Wormhole sends a message to say, yep, that happened. Go ahead and mint another version on the destination. So let's say Solana to Ethereum. That's great, but what happens is you're locked into one bridge, so you'll create certain versions. This could be with Axelar, this could be with Seller, you name it. And you're locked into this certain bridge, and you have these origin chains that you have to come back to because these assets are locked on these different chains. So with native token transfers, effectively what you get is a burn and mint solution. So you're burning and minting, and then the actual developer or the asset issuer is able to take over the contracts and own them. And why that's important. So if you're able to own the contracts, you can do things like take over a non-native deployment. You can configure what security you like. Candidly, if they're like, hey, Wormhole, you're not up to snuff when it comes to security, we're going to swap you guys out for something else, they can do that. So it's future-proof in that way. You're able to completely own the asset, the minting and burning of the asset, and create this unified standard across all these different chains. There's a few things up here, but I'd rather just talk over it. But the one thing I will say is, there's no need for liquidity pools, right? We do a lot to ultimately give users this one experience. Native asset on one chain to native asset on another chain. We don't want wrapped assets. We don't want to have all these different USDCs. We want to go from, if I'm on Ethereum, I want to be able to swap native Sol for native ETH, as an example. And ways in which you would do that over the past number of years, there's a ton of different ones. And if you come find me after, I'll talk you through all of them. But one of the popular ones was to lock an asset in one chain, like I just mentioned, mint on another, but you get a wrapped asset. You don't have a native asset on that chain. And so what this does is it takes all this complexity. You don't even need to understand it. And the asset issuer owns the contracts. They can burn and mint between all these different chains and put in whatever security configurations that they need to do. And so this is just an example of all this stuff we're talking about. You condense it down to what is the user seeing. So you have a number of different chains you can go to and one unified AUSD standard across all these different chains.
Please welcome